September 1939. In just 6 years, 85 million people would die, more than the entire population of Brazil at the time. Entire cities would be erased from the map. A people would be systematically exterminated in industrial gas chambers. World War II was not merely a conflict between nations, it was the greatest catastrophe ever produced by humanity. And it began with the signing of a treaty that promised peace. The year is 1939. Europe still bled from the wounds of World War I, ended in 1918 with 20 million dead. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany. It lost 13% of its territory, 10% of its population, and was forced to pay reparations equivalent to trillions of dollars in today's money. The Great Depression of 1929 destroyed the German economy. Unemployment, hunger, and national humiliation created the perfect breeding ground for extremism. In 1919, Adolf Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, an obscure group of 55 members. With extraordinary oratorical gifts, he transformed it into the Nazi Party by 1921. He exploited German resentment, preaching racial superiority and blaming Jews, communists, and foreigners for the country's misery. In 1923, he attempted a failed coup in Munich, the Beer Hall Putsch, and was imprisoned. In jail, he wrote Mein Kampf, his manifesto of hatred and conquest. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Within just 18 months, he abolished democracy and concentrated all power in his hands as Führer. He rearmed Germany in violation of the Versailles Treaty. In 1936, he remilitarized the Rhineland. In 1938, he annexed Austria, the Anschluss, and then the Czech Sudetenland. Europe, still traumatized by the previous war, yielded at every step. Winston Churchill warned, "You chose dishonor. You will have war as well." September 1, 1939, 4:45 a.m. The German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opens fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte. Simultaneously, 1.5 million German soldiers cross the Polish border on 3 fronts. This is Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Tanks, aviation, and infantry coordinated in an unprecedented fashion. Poland, with cavalry against tanks, resisted only 36 days. On September 17, the USSR invaded from the east, according to a secret pact with Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria. The son of a customs official, he dreamed of becoming an artist. He was rejected twice by the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He served in World War I as a corporal and earned the Iron Cross. Germany's defeat in 1918 traumatized him. He was vegetarian, didn't drink, didn't smoke, yet ordered the extermination of 11 million people. His ability to mobilize masses with passionate speeches is studied today as a phenomenon of psychological manipulation. The Axis, uniting Germany, Italy, and Japan, faced the Allies, the United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Churchill led British resistance with immortal phrases, "We have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat." Stalin, despite his pact with Hitler, became an essential ally after the German invasion in 1941. Roosevelt mobilized American support before Pearl Harbor and entered the war in December 1941 after the Japanese attack. June 22, 1941. Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history. 3 million German soldiers advanced against the USSR along a 3,000-kilometer front. Stalin, who had ignored all intelligence warnings, suffered a psychological breakdown for days. But the Russian winter and Soviet resistance turned the campaign into a nightmare. Hitler had made the same fatal mistake as Napoleon, underestimating the space, the cold, and Russian determination. Stalingrad, 1942–1943. The most brutal battle in human history. For 200 days, Germans and Soviets fought house by house, floor by floor, in smoldering ruins on the banks of the Volga River. Temperature, -40 degrees. Dead on both sides, over 2 million. General Paulus and his 91,000 men surrendered in February 1943, the first German field marshal to surrender in history. Stalingrad was the turning point. Germany would never advance east again. While armies destroyed each other on the battlefronts, Hitler was implementing the final solution. At the Wannsee Conference in January 1942, 15 senior Nazi officials planned the systematic extermination of 11 million European Jews. Camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor operated as death factories. In occupied countries, clandestine resistance movements sabotaged railways, spied for the Allies, and hid the persecuted, like in Frank's family, in Amsterdam, from July 1942 to August 1944. June 6, 1944, D-Day. 156,000 Allied soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy aboard 5,000 ships and 13,000 aircraft. On Omaha Beach, 2,000 Americans died in the first hours. Within 24 hours, the Allies had established a beachhead. By August, Paris was liberated. Simultaneously, in the Pacific, the U.S. used the atomic bomb for the first time in history. Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, 140,000 dead. 3 days later, Nagasaki, 70,000 more lives lost. The human toll is incomprehensible, 85 million dead. The Soviet Union lost 27 million, 1 in every 8 citizens. Poland lost 17% of its population. 6 million Jews exterminated in the Holocaust, 2/3 of all European Jews. Hiro Onoda, a Japanese soldier in the Philippines, didn't learn the war had ended and kept fighting until 1974. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz and founded logotherapy. Miep Gies risked her life hiding in Frank and preserved her diary for humanity. With the war's end, the Allies held the Nuremberg trials between 1945 and 1946, an unprecedented tribunal in history. 24 Nazi leaders were tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Hermann Göring was condemned to death but committed suicide hours before execution. Rudolf Hess received life imprisonment. The proceedings established for the first time that heads of state can be held responsible for crimes against civilian populations, a principle that underpins modern international law. During the war, totalitarian regimes tightly controlled information. Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda turned radio, cinema, and newspapers into weapons of war. In democratic countries, correspondents like Ernie Pyle risked their lives to show the reality of the front. The first images of concentration camps, filmed by the Allies in 1945, shocked the world. Many, even in Germany, claimed they hadn't known the full extent of the horror. Eisenhower ordered extensive photographic records, so that no one can ever say it didn't happen. World War II left over 1,700 monuments and memorials across Europe alone. The Holocaust Museum in Washington receives 1.5 million visitors a year. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem documents each of the 6 million Jewish victims. The Diary of Anne Frank has been translated into 70 languages. Stalingrad was renamed Volgograd in 1961, but the statue, the Motherland Calls, standing 85 meters tall, remains the world's largest sculpture of a woman, an eternal symbol of Soviet resistance. The post-1945 world was entirely redesigned. The United Nations was created in October 1945 to prevent new conflicts. The Marshall Plan injected $13 billion to rebuild Western Europe. The Cold War divided the world between the USA and USSR for 4 decades. Israel was founded in 1948, fulfilling the promise of a homeland for the Jewish people. The European Union was born from the determination to never again allow war between European neighbors. The nuclear world we live in today was a direct product of the Manhattan Project. 80 years later, the parallels unsettle historians. Speeches blaming minorities for economic crises. Leaders challenging international treaties and promising lost national greatness. Elections used to bury democracy from within, exactly as Hitler did in 1933. Philosopher George Santayana warned, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The rise of ultranationalist movements in Europe and the Americas makes this lesson more urgent than ever. World War II taught us that evil doesn't arise from nowhere, it grows in silence, fed by omission and complicity. Every generation has a duty to know this history. Because as long as we remember, we honor the 85 million who died. Because as long as we remember, we protect the future. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. The history you don't know may be the one that repeats itself.